Her brother-in-law inquired for her and likely put in a good word with Mr. Liu, which is why Mr. Liu reduced the fee. Of course, 9,000 yuan was still a large sum of money for her now. She considered it a lesson learned. From now on, she'd have to be extra careful on the streets. Luxury cars? She couldn't afford to scratch them. Is your brother-in-law coming back soon? Yes, tomorrow. Good. Your older sister and I will come over early the day after tomorrow. Are you cooking yourself? I'll go help you. Hai Ling, who had relied on her younger sister for years, was a capable woman both at home and outside. But now, with a baby and no income, she was forced to be a housewife by her husband. The sisters chatted for a while on the phone before ending the call. Mr. Jean, do you work overtime every night? Is something the matter? The weekend is almost here, and Grandma, your parents, they're coming over for dinner. Our house is too empty. I was thinking we should find some time in these 2 days to look at furniture and buy everything we need. Jean-Ian remained silent. His work was extremely busy, and his schedule was packed every day. It was really difficult to squeeze in time to accompany her to buy furniture. Seeing that he didn't speak, Hai Tong said understandingly, "If you don't have time, I can go buy it myself." Jean-Ian hummed in agreement. "You are the mistress of this house. You can make decisions about household matters. Just tell me about major issues." He didn't have that much time to manage the small matters at home. "Okay, I'll tell Xiao Jun. I won't go back to the shop today. I'll go shopping." Their home needed to be furnished. Jean-Ian didn't speak. He turned and went back to his room. Not long after, he came out of the room and said to Hai Tong, "I'm going to work. Be careful driving." Hai Tong casually reminded him. Jean-Ian took the unopened steamed dumplings and soy milk and left. He drove the commercial vehicle he had bought to appear pour in front of Hai Tong and left Mingyuan Gardens. After leaving the complex, he saw his Rolls-Royce and the security detail's car parked on the roadside. He stopped his car by the side of the road. "Young master." The bodyguards quickly got out of the car and surrounded him, opening the Rolls-Royce's door for him. One bodyguard respectfully asked, "Young master, should we dispose of this for you?" He was referring to the breakfast Jean-Ian was still holding. Jean-Ian casually handed the uneaten steamed dumplings to the bodyguard without saying a word, letting the bodyguards handle it. The car door closed, and the car quickly started, merging into the traffic. Hai Tong spent the whole day running around and finally bought all the necessary items for the house. The kitchenware she had ordered online was also gradually delivered. That night, Jean-Ian returned very late. When he arrived, Hai Tong was already sound asleep. He didn't disturb her. He just walked around the house, looked at the home Hai Tong had arranged, and thought to himself that this woman was quite good at managing a household. Perhaps she wasn't scheming. Maybe she married him not for anything else, but for a place to call home. After all, she had been living at her sister's house, which must have felt like imposing on them. Of course, Jean-Ian wouldn't think Hai Tong was a good woman just because of a few days of interaction. He still needed to continue observing her. As the saying goes, time reveals a person's true character. Only through daily interactions could he see her true nature. When busy, time seemed to fly by particularly fast. In the blink of an eye, Saturday arrived. Last night, Hai Tong deliberately waited for Jean-Ian to return home late and arranged to go to the market together to buy groceries on Saturday morning. Last night, Hai Tong had called the old lady and learned that the in-laws coming today would likely fill 2 or 3 tables, because Jean-Yin's younger brothers were also coming. The old lady's intention was that since she and Jean-Yin had received their marriage certificate, Hai Tong was officially a daughter-in-law of the Jean family. Besides meeting the elders, she should also meet those of the same generation, so they wouldn't be strangers if they met on the street. There were a lot of groceries to buy today, and she was afraid she wouldn't be able to carry them all back by herself. Having Jean-Yin drive meant they could buy as much as needed without worrying about carrying it. Just like that day, at 6 o'clock in the morning, Jean-Yin was awakened by Hai Tong's voice call. Jean-Yin, who was very grumpy when woken up, really had to control himself, almost becoming a ninja turtle, to avoid yelling at Hai Tong. "Mr. Jean." Hai Tong's voice was crisp and pleasant to hear. Jean-Yin rubbed his temples and said in a low voice, "Give me 10 minutes. Okay, I've fried some noodles. Come out and eat when you're ready, and then we'll go out to buy groceries. Jeanine, what time did you get up? It was only 6 o'clock in the morning, and she had already finished making breakfast. A little after 5, preparing a meal for 2 or 3 tables required a lot of time, so she had to get up early to manage it. Jeanine didn't say anything else and silently ended the call. She took meeting his family seriously. They were his family, and Jeanine was satisfied with her attitude. 10 minutes later, Jeanine appeared at the dining table in casual clothes. She was still eating. When she saw him, she smiled and said, "Try the noodles I fried. My sister says my fried noodles are delicious." Jeanine glanced at his breakfast. It looked good and appetizing. He graciously finished the plate of fried noodles. It was indeed delicious. Her cooking skills must be very good. He was lucky. Eating breakfast made by her was much more reassuring than eating breakfast bought outside. Hai Tong cleared the dishes and went into the kitchen to wash them. "Mr. Jean, are all your clothes black?" Jean-Ine remained silent, which was taken as agreement. "What size clothes do you wear? I'll buy you a few outfits in other colors when I go shopping next time. You already have a serious face, and always wearing black gives people a cold impression." Jean Yin's eyes turned cold, and his tone also became icy. "Don't interfere with my clothes." He liked black. If she didn't like it, she could poke her own eyes out and not look. Hai Tong heard the coldness and displeasure in his words. After a moment of silence, she said, "I'm sorry, I overstepped. Everyone has their own preferences. I shouldn't try to change yours just because I don't like them." Jeanine didn't reply. He turned and went out to the balcony. Looking at the balcony, which she had arranged like a small garden, his tense face softened a bit. A few minutes later, Hai Tong took her purse and called out, "Mr. Jean, let's go." Jeanine came back from the balcony, also silently, and quietly took the car keys. The couple went out together. The couple tacitly avoided mentioning the slight unpleasantness from earlier. They were not familiar with each other, didn't understand each other, and were now living together, entering a period of adjustment. There would be more unpleasantness in the future, arising from their lack of understanding. Hai Tong was meticulous in her work. She had already decided on the dishes to be made today and listed the ingredients needed for each dish. With the shopping list in hand, she went straight to the market, making the shopping process much faster. Jeanine gave Hai Tong high marks for her approach to daily life. After 2 hours of wandering the market, they finally returned. Accustomed to being chauffeured in luxury cars, Jeanine, despite his regular workouts and martial arts training, felt quite tired after accompanying Hai Tong on her 2-hour market trip and carrying the groceries. He truly would rather deal with endless documents and meetings than accompany a woman shopping, especially at the market. After parking, Hai Tong received a call from old Madame Jean before she could even get out of the car. "Hai Tong, are you home? We're downstairs." Hai Tong smiled. "Grandma, we just got back from the market. Wait for us downstairs. We'll be right there." "You and Aine went to the market?" The old lady sounded delighted, thinking that her cold and arrogant grandson had actually lowered himself to accompany Hai Tong to the market. It was good that he was pretending to be poor. Let him experience the life of an ordinary person. Yes, to buy some groceries. Aine is usually busy with work. He's never been to a market in his life. It's good to take him there. Hai Tong, make Aine carry things. He's strong. Don't tire yourself out. Jeanine, "Grandma, whose grandson am I?" After getting out of the car, Hai Tong held her phone to her ear with one hand and opened the back door with the other. Reaching in, she took out a foldable shopping cart and gestured for Jean-Ine to unfold it. "Grandma, don't worry, I won't tire myself out." The cart wasn't big enough. She had bought too many vegetables and fruits, and the cart couldn't hold everything. Jean-Ine carried the rest. From beginning to end, she was relaxed and not tired at all. "Grandma, we're coming up now." "Good. See you later." The old lady hung up. Hai Tong put her phone back in her pocket and pushed the cart. She said to Jean-Ine, whose hands were full, "Mr. Jean, let's go. Grandma and the others are downstairs waiting for us." Walking beside her, Jean-Ine reminded her in a low voice, "Don't call me Mr. Jean in front of my grandmother and the others. Call me Jean-Ine." "Okay, it was just a name." Hai Tong wouldn't dwell on it. Soon, the old lady and the others saw the young couple returning. Hai Tong pushed the small cart piled high with vegetables, drinks, and fruits. And their Zhan family's most outstanding man had his hands full of bags. The two walked side by side, a rather harmonious picture. Zhan Yin, the ninth young master of the Zhan family, 15 years younger than Zhan Yin and still a high school student, couldn't contain himself. He burst out laughing. For as long as he could remember, he had been most afraid of his serious and strict elder cousin. In his impression, his cousin was always cold, arrogant, and aloof, looking down on them as if they were mere mortals. He never thought his cousin would have a day as a mere mortal. "Little Nine," the old lady called out to him, her own eyes smiling. She thought Zhan Yin's hiding his true identity to test Hai Tong's character wasn't without its benefits. At least they could see another side of him. "Grandma, I can't help it. Let me laugh a little longer," Zhan Yin said with a grin. "Sister-in-law should have made my brother carry a chicken in one hand, a duck in the other, and a fat baby on his back. Everyone." It was an unimaginable scene. Remember this, everyone. Don't reveal our true identities. Hai Tong doesn't know. Boss, you and your wife will say you don't have pensions, that you just grow vegetables and flowers at home, occasionally earning some pocket money. We agreed on this before we came. Remember it. If you slip up, Ain will settle the score with you. Don't come crying to me for help. The old lady found her eldest grandson's charade quite amusing and enthusiastically helped him maintain the pretense of poverty. She firmly believed Hai Tong was a good girl, definitely not someone after money. At her age, she was a sharp judge of character. Understood. Everyone responded softly. They weren't entirely unfamiliar with Hai Tong. After all, she had saved the old lady's life. It was the old lady's son and daughter-in-law who had thanked Hai Tong at the time. Zhan Yin's mother didn't say much. She disapproved of her mother-in-law's desire for her eldest son to marry Hai Tong. But since the old lady had persuaded her proud son, there was nothing she could do to stop it. Hai Tong had saved the old lady, so Zhan Yin's mother was also grateful to her. Their family had thanked and offered to repay Hai Tong, but she had politely declined. Unexpectedly, the old lady had taken a liking to Hai Tong, believing her to be a girl of excellent character. Then she vigorously pushed for Zhan Yin and Hai Tong to get together. And in the end, the old lady got her wish. Fortunately, Zhan Yin had said he would only register the marriage with Hai Tong. He still needed to observe her for a while to confirm that she was as good as his grandmother said, before he would truly solidify the marriage. Zhan Yin's mother hoped that in the end, her eldest son and Hai Tong would have an amicable separation. They were truly mismatched in every aspect. Of course, for the old lady's sake, she wouldn't do anything to Hai Tong. Let nature take its course. "Grandma," the newlywed couple approached. Hai Tong smiled and greeted the old lady. Then, she nodded and greeted Zhan Yin's father, uncles, and their wives. These were people she had met once, but the impression wasn't deep. As for the young, handsome men, she hadn't met them before, but she could guess they were Zhan Yin's younger brothers. "Hai Tong, you should address your Uncle Li Rong as Dad and your Aunt Tang as Mom now." The old lady reminded Hai Tong with a smile. Zhan Yin's mother's maiden name was Tang, her given name Junyi. Zhan Li Rong looked at his daughter-in-law warmly. He trusted his mother's judgment, and besides, he didn't interfere in his sons' private lives, giving them full freedom. He was a very open-minded parent. Tang Junyi didn't quite accept Hai Tong as her daughter-in-law, but she was well-mannered. Her well-maintained face also held a gentle expression with a hint of a smile. Hai Tong gracefully addressed Zhan Li Rong as Dad and Tang Junyi as Mom. "Grandma, let's go upstairs first. It's hot outside," Zhan Yin said in a low voice. The old lady called out to her second son. The second young master Zhan immediately came over to help Hai Tong push the small cart. The old lady insisted on Hai Tong helping her upstairs, even though she was very robust. Soon, they returned to the house. Hai Tong invited everyone to sit down and busied herself making tea, pouring water, washing fruit, and cutting it into platters. "Hai Tong, come here, let Ain introduce everyone to you." The old lady looked around her eldest grandson's small home. It was decorated very warmly. She didn't need to ask to know it was Hai Tong's doing. She stopped Hai Tong, who was about to fetch snacks, and glared at her eldest grandson, signaling Jean-Yin to introduce his brothers to Hai Tong. Jean-Yin said indifferently, "You all introduce yourselves to your eldest sister-in-law." Starting with the second young Master Jean, all the way to the ninth young Master Jean. Each respectfully addressed Hai Tong as eldest sister-in-law. Jean Yin, being naturally outgoing, chatted most animatedly with Hai Tong. After witnessing his older brother being ordered around like a porter by his sister-in-law, the young man firmly decided to cozy up to her. He believed that from now on, his sister-in-law would be his protector. Hai Ling and Zhou Honglin arrived with their son, Zhou Yang, a little later than the Zhan family. Zhou Honglin had initially not taken the meeting between the two families seriously. He knew his wife had scratched someone's luxury car and would have to pay a hefty sum. However, because his brother-in-law knew the car owner, the compensation was reduced to 9,000 yuan. This made Zhou Honglin wary of his yet-to-be-met brother-in-law. His attitude changed. Upon seeing Zhang Yin, he was secretly stunned by his brother-in-law's imposing aura, which was even more intimidating than his own company's CEO. "Mr. Zhang." Zhou Honglin extended his right hand with a broad smile. "Hello, I'm Hai Tong's brother-in-law." Zhang Yin shook hands with Zhou Honglin and called him brother-in-law indifferently. He also addressed Hai Ling as sister. Upon seeing her brother-in-law, Hai Ling was quite satisfied. He was handsome, although more imposing than in his marriage certificate photo, and seemed like a quiet, aloof person. "Yang, call him uncle," Hai Ling instructed her son. Zhou Yang, a chubby-cheeked boy with bright, black eyes like his mother's, constantly looked around with an innocent and adorable expression that charmed everyone. Jeanine couldn't help but ask, "Sister, can I hold him?" Hai Ling smiled. "Of course." She handed her son to her sister, Hai Tong. Only after Hai Tong took her nephew did Jean-Yin take Zhou Yang from his wife. This gesture made Jean-Yin look at his sister-in-law in a new light. She was thoughtful and polite, aware of propriety, and mindful of avoiding unnecessary physical contact by having Hai Tong hand him the child. He and Hai Tong were legally married, so any physical contact between them was normal. Jean-Yin carried Zhou Yang upstairs. Although the little boy couldn't speak much, he knew how to address people. Jean-Yin, with his aloof demeanor, usually intimidated children. Even Zhang Jiao, his younger brother, was terrified of him, which was why he quickly clung to his sister-in-law. Zhou Yang, however, was not afraid of Jean-Yin and sweetly called him uncle after being picked up. The young couple welcomed Hai Ling's family of 3 into the house, and then introduced everyone in the Zhan family. The Zhan family knew that Hai Tong's parents had passed away and that the two sisters had relied on the compensation money to live and complete their studies. They were very polite and respectful towards Hai Ling. Although Hai Ling was now a housewife, somewhat detached from society after a few years, she had been in the workforce before marriage. She observed that the Zhan family members were well-mannered and had good family values, unlike typical rural families. Old Mrs. Zhan had mentioned that their family was from the countryside, but due to the children's success in the city and their acquired wealth, the whole family moved to the city. However, she still frequently returned to the countryside for extended stays. The Zhan family estate was built in the suburbs, away from the bustling city center. There were fields and farmland surrounding the estate, so it was understandable that the old lady considered herself living in the countryside. It was just a gilded countryside. After her sister's family arrived, Hai Tong started preparing lunch. To her surprise, Jeanine took the initiative to help her in the kitchen. "Mr. Jean, I can manage on my own. You should go out and talk with them," Jeanine said indifferently. "They're quite comfortable at my home. They don't need me to accompany them. Then chat with my brother-in-law." A flicker of coldness crossed Zhang Yin's eyes, quickly replaced by his usual indifferent expression. "We don't have much in common." Zhou Honglin was a master flatterer and schemer, perhaps with some genuine skills. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the manager of a sizable company. Zhang Yin disliked interacting with Zhou Honglin. Not only was Zhou Honglin the type of person he loathed, but it was also due to Zhou Honglin's attitude towards Hai Ling. Zhou Yang was thirsty. Even though his water bottle was full and sitting right on the coffee table in front of Zhou Honglin, he didn't bother to pick it up, instead calling for Hai Ling to get it and give their son a drink. This was their first meeting, and with Zhang Yin's sharp eyes, he saw that his brother-in-law didn't seem to value Hai Ling as his wife and considered childcare at home to be an easy task. The Zhan family's traditions and ancestral teachings made Zhan Yin dislike men who didn't respect their wives. He and Hai Tong had a flash marriage, meeting only at their marriage registration, with no feelings between them, but he still gave Hai Tong the respect she deserved as his wife. Hearing this, Hai Tong smiled. Since we can't agree, let's drop it. Third brother is eloquent. With him talking to brother-in-law, he won't feel neglected by us. The third John's son was a smiling tiger, able to chat with anyone, calculating even while laughing and joking. Then you can be my assistant. Jeanine didn't speak. He had come in to help her anyway. The young couple busied themselves in the kitchen, to the satisfaction of both families. Hai Ling felt her brother-in-law was considerate towards her younger sister. At lunch, everyone praised Hai Tong's cooking after tasting it. Perhaps accustomed to delicacies, they found Hai Tong's home-cooked dishes particularly delicious. After a bustling day, both families had dinner and left in the evening, leaving the small home quiet again. As soon as Hai Tong entered, she threw herself onto the sofa, then lay down, saying to the man who followed, "My back is killing me." Zhan Yin didn't speak. Hai Tong just said it casually, not expecting him to offer any sympathy. If he did, she would find it insincere. Zhan Yin silently tidied up. The house was a mess because of little Zhou Yang. After cleaning the living room, he went into the kitchen, took an apron from behind the door, tied it on quite expertly, and began washing the mountain of dishes. Johnny doesn't talk much, but he's very thoughtful. Tong Tong. We'll have a good life with him. Hai Tong watched Zhan Yin washing dishes, recalling her sister's whispered words. Her sister was very satisfied with Zhan Yin. Lying down for a bit, Hai Tong suddenly remembered something, jumped up from the sofa, and rushed to the kitchen. Then, she saw a sink full of bubbles. "How much dish soap did you use?" Hai Tong couldn't help but laugh. Zhan Yin's handsome face was full of embarrassment. "I accidentally poured half the bottle." Zhan Yin didn't dare look at his wife, afraid he wouldn't be able to stop himself from blushing. He really had accidentally poured too much dish soap, not because he didn't know how to wash dishes. Although he was now the head of the Zhan family, he had received comprehensive education and training since childhood, and his ability to take care of himself wasn't bad. It was just that he hadn't done housework for a very, very long time. His hands were out of practice, so he poured too much dish soap, filling the sink with bubbles. He had rinsed it several times, but still hadn't cleaned it, and now his wife had seen it. He couldn't explain himself, even if he jumped into the Yellow River. "Mr. Zhan, let me do it." Hai Tong gestured for him to move aside. Zhan Yin paused for a moment, then stepped aside and gave his apron to Hai Tong. He didn't leave, though, instead standing to the side, watching Hai Tong wash the dishes. "Next family gathering, let's just eat at a restaurant. It's easier." "Okay." Hai Tong had no objections. Today was the first meeting of their families, so she felt she needed to show her ability in front of her in-laws by cooking at home. "What did Grandma say to you?" Zhan Yin suddenly asked. Hai Tong paused, turning to look at him. Zhan Yin was also looking at her. Their eyes met, and Zhan Yin saw a hint of amusement in her gaze. Then he heard her say, "Grandma asked if we were sleeping in separate rooms. She said since we're married, I should be bolder, more proactive, pounce on you, strip you naked, and sleep with you." Zhan Yin. That sounded like something his grandmother would say. Grandma also said she hopes to have a great-granddaughter next year. She specifically emphasized a great-granddaughter, saying that if we don't have a daughter, we should keep trying until we do. She even said there's a huge reward for having a daughter. She'll give me her entire life savings. Zhan Yin. His grandmother's life savings amounted to tens of billions. She really valued Hai Tong as his eldest grandson's wife. "Were there any daughters in your grandfather's generation?" Zhan Yin shook his head. "There was a daughter in my great-grandfather's generation, his younger sister, but she was short-lived, dying in an accident before she turned 5. There haven't been any daughters in the generation since. In his generation, there were 9 brothers. Hai Tong continued washing the dishes, smiling. No wonder Grandma is so generous, offering her entire life savings. It turns out it's harder than climbing to heaven. Her words, however, made John Een overthink. He believed she had finally revealed her true motives. She was after his grandmother's wealth. No wonder she had charmed his grandmother so thoroughly that she disregarded his wishes and constantly nagged him to marry her. Hearing no response, Hai Tong turned to look at him. She saw his gloomy expression, and when she caught his eye, his gaze became sharp and cold. Hai Tong blinked. Had she said something wrong? Mr. Jeanine, with a stern face, turned and walked out of the kitchen, ignoring her. Watching him leave, Hai Tong muttered, "So strange." He asked the question, and I answered, and now he's giving me the cold shoulder. Does he really think I'm eager to pounce on him? He's so cold. I'm afraid I'd turn into an ice sculpture before I even got close. Hai Tong assumed Zhang Yin's sudden change in mood was because of his grandmother encouraging her to seduce him. Zhang Yin returned to his room and didn't come out for a long time. Hai Tong didn't bother with him. He was a grown man. Did he really need her to coax him? Sorry, we're not that close yet as husband and wife. Anyway, they were just living together. Even if he was angry with her forever, as long as he didn't kick her out, she didn't care. Hai Tong finished washing the dishes, tidied up the kitchen, then went out and mopped the entire house. Finally, she sat down on the swing chair she had bought on the balcony. The gentle night breeze was refreshing, and as she swayed on the swing, Hai Tong felt very comfortable. Not to mention that her balcony was like a small garden now. Looking at the thriving flowers and plants, Hai Tong once again marveled at Zhang Yin's efficiency. Steady footsteps approached, heading towards the balcony. Soon, Zhang Yin appeared on the balcony. Seeing Hai Tong swinging on the swing chair, looking comfortable and relaxed, Zhang Yin's face tightened. He walked over and handed her 2 sheets of paper. "What's this?" Hai Tong asked curiously. Zhang Yin didn't speak. The meaning was very clear. "Can't you see for yourself? Do you need to ask?" Taking the 2 sheets of paper, Hai Tong looked at the contents. It was an agreement printed in duplicate, the meaning also very clear. One for each of them. His name was signed, and a private seal was affixed. Oh, quite formal. Hai Tong tapped her toe on the ground, pushing the swing chair into motion again. She leaned back against the chair and carefully read the agreement Zhang had written. The agreement filled an entire page. Hai Tong only remembered the main points, which were that they currently had no feelings and were only married in name. He told her not to have any designs on his body. In other words, they wouldn't be intimate, wouldn't be a real husband and wife. Also, if they couldn't develop feelings within 6 months, they would divorce. He was willing to transfer the house they currently lived in to Hai Tong, along with the Dongfeng 4th MPV he currently drove. That was all. He also specifically emphasized that she was not allowed to have any designs on his grandmother's private property. These terms and conditions, except for the house and car Hai Tong would receive after the divorce, were all unfavorable to her, blatantly guarding against her trying to swindle him for money or sex. Zhang Yin said coldly, "Hai Tong, although we are husband and wife, we have no emotional foundation. I think we should sign an agreement. Don't worry. Everything else remains unchanged except for what's in the agreement." In short, she shouldn't fall in love with him, shouldn't think about sleeping with him, and shouldn't covet his grandmother's private property. Hai Tong wasn't angry. She felt it was normal for him to write this agreement. She said, "I never thought about taking grandma's savings. I have hands and feet and can support myself. I don't need to rely on the elderly." In her eyes, Grandma was just an old lady with a 2,000 or 3,000 yuan monthly pension. Even if her children and grandchildren were filial, her savings were limited, probably not even as much as hers. She really hadn't thought about taking anyone's money. She had flash-married John Een mainly to stop her sister from arguing with her brother-in-law, and also to reassure her sister. At the beginning, she had even asked John Een if they should split the bills. Her sister and brother-in-law were married for love and had feelings for each other. Splitting bills would hurt their feelings. But she and John Een were a flash marriage with no feelings whatsoever. so splitting bills would actually be quite good. Hai Tong looked Jean up and down, praising him. Mr. Jean is truly God's favorite son. With your looks, no one would dare to call themselves number one if you called yourself number two. Handsome features, great physique, this cold aura. Some people would be intimidated, but others would have the desire to conquer. Zhang Yin's eyes darkened. Hai Tong changed the subject, saying with a grin, "However, Mr. Jean is not money. Not everyone will love you. Rest assured I won't fall in love with Mr. Jean, and I won't try to take advantage of you. I have no objections to this agreement you drafted. Bring a pen, I'll sign it. But I don't have a private seal, so I'll just use a fingerprint." When Jean wrote this agreement, he thought she would be furious after reading it. He didn't expect her to be not angry at all, even praising his well-written agreement. After a moment of silence, he finally handed her the pen. Hai Tong took the pen, stood up, walked to the balcony railing, and signed her name on the agreement using the brick ledge as a support. Jeanine brought the ink pad and let her press her fingerprint on it. The agreement was in duplicate, with the couple each keeping a copy. Hai Tong casually folded the agreement and stuffed it into her pants pocket. Seeing her casual attitude, Jeanine felt a pang in his heart, but he couldn't say anything. After all, he had written the agreement, and the terms were mostly aimed at her, guarding against her, yet she hadn't added a single one. "You've had a tiring day too. Rest early." "You too," Hai Tong said with a smile. "I'll sit here for a while and enjoy the flowers. I've always had a dream of having a small garden-like balcony, and now it's come true. I can't get enough of it." She didn't seem to care about the agreement at all. Did she really have no ulterior motives for marrying him? Was he just being paranoid? Otherwise, how could she be so carefree, not angry or upset, and still smiling? Jeanine quietly watched her for a moment, then turned and left. Soon he went out with his car keys. Hai Tong casually asked from the balcony, "Mr. Jean, are you going out?" "Yes." "Don't wait for me. Just leave the door unlocked." Hai Tong smiled. "I never wait for Mr. Jean." Jeanine choked. Her reply felt like a slap in the face. Bearing the figurative slap, Jeanine left. He went to Lu Doming's house for a drink. He was really frustrated by Hai Tong. It should have been her who felt embarrassed and upset, but she didn't seem to care at all. Instead, he was the one who felt a pang in his heart. Perhaps it was the first time he had been so disregarded. Yes, Hai Tong's indifference to how harsh the agreement was indifference to him. He was so handsome, yet she hadn't thought of falling in love with him. He had a great body, yet she hadn't thought of pouncing on him, sleeping with him. Who? What was he complaining about? She was so sensible, he should be happy. At least she wouldn't be the kind of shameless, clinging woman. After some self-persuasion, Jeanine still drank a lot at Lu Dongming's place, mainly because Lu Dongming brought out all the good liquor. In the end, Jeanine got drunk. He had a very high tolerance for alcohol, so for him to get drunk meant he had consumed a significant amount, and the good liquor packed a punch. Lu Dongming was even more drunk than him. He could still walk, but Lu Dongming was the type to lie directly on the ground. Jeanine was eventually picked up by his bodyguards. On the way, the bodyguards asked the drunk, but not unconscious, "Young master." "Young master? Where to?" Mingyuan Garden. He had just met her parents today, so he couldn't stay out all night. He had to give Hai Tong some of the respect she deserved as his wife. The bodyguards then took Jeanine back to Mingyuan Garden. Although Jeanine could still walk, the bodyguards were worried and helped him upstairs. "Young master, should we wake young madam?" It was late at night, and young madam should be asleep, which is why the bodyguards asked. Jeanine patted his body, trying to find his keys to open the door, and instinctively said, "No need." They were just a couple in name only. Even if he was drunk, he didn't want her to take care of him. Who knew if she would take advantage of him while he was drunk? He was 30 years old and had yet to give away his first kiss, let alone his innocence. He never expected love. Grandma always scolded him for being a heartless man who didn't understand feelings. It was precisely because he didn't expect love that he married Hai Tong after Grandma's repeated persuasion, just to satisfy her and stop her nagging. After searching everywhere, Jeanine couldn't find his house keys. He said, "Achi, wake up your young madam." He had forgotten to take his keys when he went out. The bodyguard immediately knocked on the door. Hai Tong was asleep, but she was a light sleeper. Hearing the knocking, she woke up and listened carefully. Someone really was knocking. She quickly got up to open the door, but remembering she was in her pajamas, she grabbed a winter coat from the wardrobe, threw it on, and went to open the door. The door opened, and Jean-In and Achi saw Hai Tong wearing a thick winter coat. Both of them were stunned. It was October, yes, but it only got a little cool in the mornings and evenings. Daytime was still scorching. It wasn't cold enough for a winter coat. "Hello, I'm the designated driver. Your husband is drunk, and I brought him up." Achi reacted quickly, telling a lie, and handed Jean-In, along with the car keys, over to Hai Tong. Hai Tong suddenly felt like she was supporting a bull. So heavy. "Sir, thank you." Hai Tong thanked Achi. Achi hurriedly said it was his duty, snuck a glance at his boss, and quickly slipped away. Closing and locking the door, Hai Tong helped the unsteady Jean-In inside, complaining, "Why did you drink so much? You reek of alcohol." Jean-In didn't speak, thinking to himself, "It's because of you." Casually tossing the car keys onto the coffee table, Hai Tong helped Jean-In to his door, then released him, saying, "Your agreement states that your room is off limits to me, so I won't go in. Go in yourself. Don't shower now. Wait until tomorrow morning. You're so drunk, I'm afraid you'll drown yourself in the bathtub." Jean-In opened his door and stumbled inside. After a few steps, he stopped, slowly turned, and said to Hai Tong, "Cold dog, it's scorching hot, and you're wearing such a thick coat." He thought he was so drunk his eyes were playing tricks on him. "I didn't have time to change. I just grabbed the coat to open the door for you." Hai Tong explained and closed the door for him. With a bang, the couple were separated. Back in her room, Hai Tong immediately took off her coat, muttering, "I'm dying of heat." After she left, Jean-In stood silently for a moment before stumbling back to his bed and collapsing onto it. Only after struggling back to his own territory could he sleep soundly. Soon, he was claimed by sleep. He woke up the next day at noon. He hadn't turned on the air conditioner last night and had slept like that all night. Waking up, he felt he smelled of both alcohol and sweat. Slightly obsessed with cleanliness, he couldn't help but rush into the bathroom and throw up. Then he quickly showered. Coming out of the bathroom, he was refreshed and back to normal. Thinking about last night's drunkenness, Jean-In swore he would never let himself get drunk again. Fortunately, he had signed the agreement with Hai Tong before going out, and she hadn't taken advantage of him while he was drunk. She actually kept her word. He didn't know if writing that agreement was right or wrong. But since it was signed, he'd leave it as it was for now. His mood now calm, Jean-In felt hungry. He walked out of his room, expecting a steaming hot home-cooked meal. Instead, Hai Tong had left him only a note on the dining table, telling him that she had gone back to the shop and that he should take care of his own meals. Jean-In held the note. The shop was usually very quiet on weekends, with barely any business all day. It could easily stay closed. Hai Tong went to the shop for the quiet, so she could make the handicrafts for her online store. Shen Xiaojun also came. Seeing Hai Tong in the shop, Shen Xiaojun asked in surprise, "Tong, it's Sunday. Why are you here? You usually take your nephew to the park. I need to list some new items in my online store." Hai Tong wove her goods while looking up at her friend and smiling. "What about you? Don't even ask. My mom nagged me so much, I couldn't stand it and ran to the shop." "What did your mom nag you about this time?" "It's the same old thing. She's complaining that we went to that banquet the other night and didn't snag a rich husband. She thinks it's easy to catch a golden turtle, doesn't she? She doesn't consider what kind of person her daughter is. She really thinks her daughter is the most beautiful woman in the world." Hai Tong chuckled. Most parents in the world are like this. As soon as their children reach marriageable age, they start worrying about their children's marriage. 25 years old would have been considered old in earlier times when people married young, but in this day and age, it's still very young. My mom asked my aunt to introduce me to another boyfriend. She wants me to go on a blind date at some coffee shop tonight. Going to a coffee shop for a blind date at night. If I have one cup of coffee, we'll probably be talking till dawn. Tong, will you go on the blind date with me tonight?" Hai Tong shook her head like a rattle drum. "No way. Come on, Tong, please. We're best friends, good friends. You're the most loyal person I know. willing to go through fire and water for a friend. I'm not that loyal. You should find someone who's willing to go through fire and water for you. Shin Xiaojun coaxed. I'll buy you late-night snacks after we meet him. I have my own money. I could buy my own late-night snacks. I don't need you to treat me. Hai Tong simply didn't want to accompany her friend on a blind date. What if the guy liked her instead? She had heard of such things happening. Someone accompanied their sister-in-law on a blind date, and the guy ended up liking the sister-in-law instead. The sister-in-law was furious. That would seriously damage their relationship. She and Xiaojun were good friends who could talk about anything, but some things just couldn't be done. Accompanying Xiaojun to the banquet was different. The banquet was full of successful people, their eyes fixed on the sky, and they wouldn't look at a small fry like her. So she didn't feel any pressure. Tong tong. A familiar voice rang out. The two looked towards the entrance of the shop. Hai Tong immediately stopped what she was doing, got up, and walked out, smiling. Grandma, why are you here? I wanted to talk to you, so I came. I went to your apartment, and Ain said you weren't home, so I came to find you. The old woman looked at Hai Tong with loving eyes. After entering the shop, she asked, I remember you saying that you could keep the shop closed on weekends. Grandma, I haven't listed any new items in my online store for a while. The stock is almost sold out. I have to use my free time on the weekend to make some new items. The small things she knitted sold very well online. She had to add new items regularly, and some customers would pre-order. When she accepted an order, she had to deliver to the customer within the promised time frame. In business, promises are very important. Tong tong, you're truly clever and skilled. The old lady had received many copper wire crafts from Hai Tong, woven so realistically that she proudly displayed them in the most prominent place in her home. Even though they weren't valuable, they represented her granddaughter-in-law's affection. When guests visited and admired the crafts, the old lady would take the opportunity to promote Hai Tong's online store, leading to increased sales. Grandma Jean, have some water. Shin Xiaojun poured the old lady a glass of water. Thank you, Xiaojun. You're here today, too. Sigh. It's my mom pressuring me about marriage again. I'm hiding in the store for some peace. She keeps setting me up on blind dates, making me feel like a clearance item. Tonight, she wants me to go to XX Coffee House for another one, and I'm begging Tong Tong to go with me. The old lady's eyes twinkled, a smile on her face. I understand your mother. I'm also worried about my other grandson's marriages. They won't listen to me at all. None of them will go on blind dates. Tong Tong, why don't you accompany Xiaojun tonight? Hai Tong. The old lady was actually suggesting she go with Xiaojun on a blind date. You and Xiaojun are good friends. It's good for you to go with her and help her assess the guy. After all, you're already married. Shin Xiaojun nodded vigorously, thinking the old lady was her best ally. Tong Tong, please come with me. If you won't, at least convince my mom to stop setting me up. Shin Xiaojun acted coquettishly towards Hai Tong, with the old lady also chiming in. Hai Tong, wanting some peace, reluctantly agreed. Just this once. No more. Great. I knew Tong Tong was the best. After successfully persuading her friend to accompany her, Shin Xiaojun thoughtfully said, Grandma Jean, you and Tong Tong can chat. I'll go buy some things. She wanted to give them some private time. After Shin Xiaojun left, the old lady took out a piece of paper and handed it to Hai Tong. Grandma, what's this? A love letter for me? The old lady laughed. You're such a tease. This is a list of Ain's habits and preferences. Take a look. It will help you two build your relationship. Tong Tong, even though you and Ain don't have a foundation of feelings, feelings can be cultivated. If you both let down your guard and try to understand each other, I believe you'll be attracted to each other. Hai Tong opened the paper, thinking that Jean-Ine had already made her sign an agreement to divorce in 6 months, so she didn't want to waste time cultivating feelings. She wasn't guarding herself against Jean-Ine, but he was definitely guarded against her, even if he wasn't bad to her. Ain just has a bit of a temper when he wakes up and is a little bit of a neat freak. Otherwise, he's a good person. The old lady, having pushed for her eldest grandson's marriage, was trying hard and hoping the couple could develop feelings and grow old together. Hai Tong was stunned. He has a bad temper when he wakes up? Yes, unless he wakes up naturally. If anyone wakes him up with a phone call or by knocking, that person is in trouble. Even I wouldn't dare to pull a tiger's whiskers. Hai Tong recalled the numerous times she had called John in early in the morning, dragging him out of bed, and he didn't seem angry. Was the old lady telling the truth? Or was Jean in holding back because they were newlyweds? Tong Tong, last night did you too? The old lady winked at Hai Tong, who understood her meaning. Her face flushed slightly. Grandma, I'm a girl. You want me to pounce on a man? I really can't do that, especially not a man like Jeanine. The old lady laughed. What's there to be afraid of? You're a married couple, a legally married couple with a marriage certificate. If Aine isn't proactive, you be proactive. Grandma wants to hold a great-grandchild. Hai Tong blushed. Grandma, I'm not afraid of you getting angry, but facing your grandson's serious face, I really can't bring myself to kiss him. The old lady, Jeanine, like his grandfather, was naturally serious and aloof. When the old lady was young, she had pursued her husband for several years, using every trick in the book, before finally winning him over. Kissing him would be like gnawing on a bone that's been frozen solid for a year. Cold and hard, I'd probably chip my teeth. The old lady, Grandma, don't worry about me and Jeanine. Let things take their natural course. After all, she was just going through the motions of marriage. The old lady fumed inwardly. How could she not worry? This was the granddaughter-in-law she had chosen, the marriage she had pushed for despite her daughter-in-law's disapproval. If Hai Tong wasn't happy, she would blame herself to death. All right, let nature take its course. Grandma will help you tidy up. You go about your business. The old lady couldn't sit still at home. She often helped the gardeners with the flowers and plants, and previously she even helped with the fields outside the estate. Only after repeated persuasion from the younger generation did she stop. She even wanted to work as a cleaning lady at their family company. But as soon as she mentioned it, Zhang Yin's face had thundered. It scared her off. It wasn't the first time the old lady had come to the shop to chat with Hai Tong. Hai Tong knew that the old lady had worked hard for most of her life and couldn't stay idle. Tidying up wouldn't take much effort, so she let the old lady help organize the books while she focused on weaving her crafts. Dusting the bookshelves with a feather duster, the old lady suddenly found Hai Tong incredibly captivating as she focused on her work. She took out her phone, hid behind a bookshelf, and secretly filmed a video of Hai Tong's concentration. After filming, she sent it to her precious grandson. Of course, Jeanine wouldn't reply to his grandmother. The old lady didn't care whether he replied or not, as long as he watched it. Hai Tong was like a book, each page revealing something new. She just needed to draw her grandson in, to get him to start reading Hai Tong's book. When one is engrossed in something, time flies by. When Hai Tong finished making the items customers had pre-ordered, she looked at the time and saw it was already past 6 in the evening. Shin Xiaojun's blind date was at 7:30 p.m. The location was Yuyi Coffee House, the largest and most elegant coffee house in Guangxing, located in the bustling city center. Thanks to the owner's investment, the coffee house was soundproofed. Stepping into the elegant interior, the outside noise disappeared, allowing people to relax without being disturbed. Therefore, Yuyi Coffee House was very popular, and many people liked to go there, even if they didn't drink coffee. Just to escape and find some peace was good enough. Shin Xiaojun arrived to pick up her friend on a motorcycle. Seeing Shin Xiaojun on the motorcycle, the old lady said, "June girl, why don't you walk?" Shin Xiaojun took off her helmet and grinned. "I love the feeling of speeding on my motorcycle. At this time, all the main roads are jammed, but my mode of transport is unaffected by traffic." "Grandma Jean, have you eaten? Why don't you come along too? You've eaten more salt than I've eaten rice. You can help me judge." My aunt said the guy works at Shangshe Group. Shangshe Group was the second largest corporation in Guangxing, second only to the richest family Shangshe Group. Both companies had high thresholds. Without real talent, one couldn't even get a foot in the door. It could be said that anyone working at these two companies had something to brag about. The old lady smiled. "Tong Tong and I have already had takeout. My second grandson will be here soon to take me home. I won't go and be a third wheel. I'm not bright enough, and I flicker too much. It wouldn't be good if I caused a short circuit." Shin Xiaojun laughed even harder, truly liking this humorous old lady. She hadn't met John Ian yet, but had heard from her best friend that he was a serious and aloof man. She couldn't imagine how Grandma Jean raised such a grandson, so unlike his grandmother. Soon, Johnny Chen arrived. He came to pick up their family's incognito ancestor and go home. The ancestor had specifically reminded him to drive a cheaper car. The cheapest car in the garage was the BMW the servants used for grocery shopping, which still cost over $1 million. There was a time to buy a new one, so Johnny Chen had to borrow the gardener's pickup truck to pick up his grandmother. Sister-in-law, I'm here to take Grandma home. Johnny Chen entered the shop and greeted Hai Tong. Okay, be careful on the road. Grandma, send me a message when you get home. Hai Tong reminded the grandmother and grandson and gave them the 2 handicrafts she had made today. She gave Johnny Chen a potted copper wire money tree. Johnny Chen didn't refuse. Having seen his sister-in-law's crafts often at home, he quite appreciated them. He felt that although the copper wire crafts weren't worth much, they were very beautiful. Soon, Johnny Chen drove off with the old lady. After some distance, the old lady asked her second grandson, "Where did you get this car?" "Uncle Wang usually uses it to haul fertilizer and flower pots. I borrowed it from him, so sister-in-law wouldn't be suspicious." His older brother was pretending to be poor, so they had to pretend to be poor in front of their sister-in-law as well. It was quite fun, though. Johnny Chen was looking forward to the day when his older brother truly fell in love with his sister-in-law, and then his sister-in-law discovered his brother's deception. What would her reaction be? Well, to put it bluntly, he was looking forward to his older brother's groveling pursuit. "I thought this car looked familiar. It turns out it's Uncle Wang's." The old lady took out her phone and called Jeanine. After Jeanine answered the phone, she instructed, Grandma has a craving. Go to Yui Coffee House and buy me some pastries. Their pastries are also superb, and Grandma loves them." Jeanine frowned and said, "There are so many people at home, Grandma. You can just ask them to buy them for you." He had to make a trip himself. "What? Can't Grandma order you around anymore? I'm telling you, if I don't get pastries from Yui Coffee House later, I'll go to Jean Group tomorrow and work as a cleaner, picking up trash and collecting scrap." Jean Yin's face darkened. Since his grandfather passed away, his grandmother had been like a wild horse off its reins, often dressing plainly and wandering around outside. And look, she'd wandered back with a wife for him. "I'll go buy them." Jeanine gritted his teeth and agreed. The old lady hung up the phone, satisfied. Johnny Chen hurriedly said, "Grandma, if you want pastries from Yui Coffee House, we can make a detour there. You don't have to make Big Brother go." What do you know? The old lady had other intentions. Johnny Chen understood and laughed. "Grandma, are you messing with my brother again?" The old lady glared at him. "Ask one more question, and I'll mess with you." Johnny Chen immediately fell silent. Although he sympathized with his elder brother, for his own peace, it was better not to say anything. A dead elder brother was better than a dead him. Grandma was a mischievous old child, enjoying playing pranks on her grandsons. On the other side, Hai Tong locked up the bookstore, took the helmet from her friend, put it on, grabbed the keys, and said, "I'll drive." Shin Xiaojun obediently sat behind her, naturally wrapping her arms around Hai Tong's waist. "Hai Tong, if only you were a man, I'd marry you, and my mom wouldn't be nagging me about marriage every day. Behave yourself, don't touch me, or I'll throw you off." Hai Tong warned her friend before starting the motorcycle. Hai Tong often passed by Yui Coffee House, but never went in, simply because she didn't like coffee. She preferred rose or chrysanthemum tea. At Yui Coffee House, the man was already waiting, perhaps to make a good impression. He wore a suit and a red and white striped tie, holding a bouquet of roses at the entrance. Shin Xiaojun led her friend towards him. "Are you Mr. Lan?" Mr. Lan looked Shin Xiaojun and Hai Tong up and down, momentarily unsure which one was his blind date. The matchmaker had shown him a photo, but he had only glanced at it casually. He knew the woman was quite pretty, but hadn't really memorized Miss Shin's appearance. The matchmaker told him to hold a bouquet of roses at the entrance, and Miss Shin would recognize him. "Are you Miss Shin?" "I am." Mr. Lan smiled and invited them inside. He had already booked a window seat with a view of the street. After they sat down, Mr. Lan glanced at Hai Tong several times. Shin Xiaojun introduced her friend, mentioning that Hai Tong was married. Mr. Lon felt a pang of regret. He thought Hai Tong had a better temperament than Shin Xiaojun. He had taken a liking to Hai Tong at first glance, assuming she was his date. Turns out, she was already taken. Shin Xiaojun agreed to the blind date. Firstly, because she couldn't stand her mother's nagging, and secondly, because it was arranged by her aunt, so she had to give her aunt some face. She wasn't interested in Mr. Lon, and after chatting for a while, she liked him even less. Mr. Lon worked at Shang Corporation, a leader of some sort, and considered himself a successful elite. Although he knew the Shin family wasn't poor, he thought they were just nouveau riche who got rich from demolition. He looked down on Shin Xiaojun, constantly showing off his superiority, and even suggested splitting expenses after marriage. Hearing this, Hai Tong kicked her friend lightly under the table, warning her that this man was no good. Mr. Lon, I'm going to the restroom. Shin Xiaojun interrupted Mr. Lan's rambling, excused herself, and left. In the restroom, she called her aunt and complained, then called her mother, saying that if her mother forced her on another blind date with just anyone, she would shave her head and become a nun. Just because he worked at Shang Corporation, he acted so high and mighty. He wasn't even the CEO. Maybe even the CEO of Shang wouldn't be so arrogant. Hai Tong also disliked Mr. Lon. After her friend went to the restroom, she looked out the window, not wanting to talk to him. That was when Johnine walked in. He had the habit of surveying his surroundings wherever he went, and this time was no exception. Unexpectedly, he saw his wife having coffee with a strange man. Was she cheating on him? Or had the agreement she signed last night made her realize the benefits she could get from him were limited? So she was eager to find her next target and wait for him to ask for a divorce? Jeanine was about to walk over when Shin Xiaojun came out of the restroom. He then saw Shin Xiaojun say something to the man and pull his wife up to leave. Miss Shin, stay a little longer? Mr. Lon, basking in his perceived superiority, was reluctant to let Shin Xiaojun leave. Mr. Lon, I'm sorry, I don't think we're a match. Let's not see each other again. Shin Xiaojun spoke frankly and pulled Hai Tong away. As they walked, her friend suddenly stopped. Tong Tong, what's wrong? My husband. What? Before Shin Xiaojun could react, Jeanine had walked up to them. His deep, dark eyes fell on Hai Tong, the corners of his mouth curving slightly. He didn't say a word, but Hai Tong felt the sarcasm emanating from him. What was he being sarcastic about? Hai Tong glanced back at Mr. Lon, who was following them, and immediately understood. She explained, my friend Xiaojun is here on a blind date. I'm accompanying her. She wasn't rushing to find another partner. Jean-Yin remained silent. Shin Xiaojun finally saw her friend's flash marriage husband's true appearance. So cool, so handsome. Afraid that Jean-Yin would misunderstand Hai Tong, she also explained the situation. Jean-Yin then coldly said, come home early. Hai Tong hummed in agreement and then asked him, why are you here? Grandma asked me to buy some pastries here. She likes the pastries from this shop. Jeanine understood that this was his grandmother's doing. Knowing that Hai Tong was accompanying her friend on a blind date here, she deliberately sent him to buy pastries. Did Grandma think he would be jealous seeing Hai Tong having coffee with another man? Oh! Hai Tong just said oh, and the couple stood in silence. Finally, Hai Tong broke the silence. Then I'll go first. After you deliver the pastries to Grandma, come back. I'll leave the door unlocked for you. Jean-Yin responded coldly. Okay. The couple parted ways. Hai Tong left on her friend's motorcycle. After packing the pastries, Jean-Yin drove his Dongfeng four-thing minivan away from Yui Coffee Shop. He drove all the way back to the Zhan family estate. The old lady hadn't gone to bed yet and was watching TV in the living room, looking bored. Jean-Yin strode over with the pastries, placed them on the coffee table, stood up straight, and said coldly, Grandma, we agreed. After the wedding, you wouldn't interfere in Hai Tong's and my life. I didn't interfere. The old lady looked innocent. Jeanine pointed at the boxes of pastries. You specifically asked me to go to Yui Coffee Shop to buy pastries. Wasn't it just so I could witness Hai Tong having coffee with another man? Grandma, I don't know what jealousy tastes like, and I won't taste it. After speaking, Jeanine turned and walked out. The old lady called after him. It's so late. Aren't you staying the night? My wife left the door unlocked for me, Jean-Ian coldly retorted. The old lady watched him walk out of the house, and after a while, muttered, "Doesn't know the taste of jealousy? Won't be jealous? I'll just wait for you to be proven wrong." Hai Tong didn't know what Jean-Ian and old Mrs. Jean had talked about. Meeting Jean-Ian at Yi Coffee House was already a surprise. Connecting it to old Mrs. Jean helping Shin Xiaojun persuade her to accompany Xiaojun. Hai Tong understood why Jean-Ian was there. But why did old Mrs. Jean do this? To make Jean-Ian misunderstand her? It wasn't her going on a blind date, it was Xiaojun. Even if Jean-Ian saw them. Thinking back to Jean Yin's expression at the coffee house, even colder than usual, Hai Tong, however slow, knew that Jean-Ian had gotten the wrong idea. Mainly because Xiaojun had gone to the restroom, leaving her alone with Mr. Lan. Fortunately, Xiaojun came back from the restroom, and she explained in time. Jean Yin's expression softened a little. Hai Tong just couldn't understand why old Mrs. Jean would do this. She had saved old Mrs. Jean's life, but she never considered herself a benefactor. It was old Mrs. Jean who insisted on treating her as one and was always very good to her. Logically, she wouldn't set her up. With her face full of speculation, Hai Tong sat on the swing chair on the balcony after returning home. She didn't even turn on the lights, quietly looking at the night sky. Jean-Ian returned late at night. When he came back, Hai Tong was already asleep. She had fallen asleep on the swing chair, but Jean-Ian didn't know. He saw that Hai Tong's door was closed and there was no light inside, so he assumed she was asleep. He sat down on the sofa and turned on the TV. He rarely watched TV, but he did so because the house was too quiet. The volume was set very low. He was afraid of disturbing Hai Tong, who was sleeping in her room. Ring, ring, ring. His phone rang. He looked at the caller ID. It was his second brother, Yi-chun. "Brother, are you all right?" Yi-chun asked with concern over the phone. Jean-Ian paused, then asked him, "Did you know Grandma was going to set me up?" "Brother, how did Grandma set you up?" "I only know that Grandma called you to Yi Coffee House to buy pastries. It's not news that Grandma likes the pastries there." Jean-Ian sneered. "My wife happened to be on a blind date at Yi Coffee House." "What?" Yi-chun exclaimed in shock. "My sister-in-law went on a blind date? Is she cheating on you, brother? You two just got your marriage license. Yesterday, both families just met and had dinner together, discussing your wedding, and she turned around and went on a blind date? She was accompanying her friend on a blind date." Yi-chun. "Brother, can you make yourself clearer? You made me misunderstand my sister-in-law." "I knew it. My sister-in-law looks like a very proper person. She definitely wouldn't do anything like that. When I arrived, it was quite a coincidence. Her friend went to the restroom, and it was just her and the blind date sitting together. That really is a coincidence. Even if Grandma sent you there, it couldn't be a coincidence that you saw that scene, right?" Jean-Ian paused, then said with a headache, "Yi Coffee House was recently bought by Grandma. She's the real owner now." As the head of the family, he knew about some of Grandma's moves. "Brother, you mean the staff that were watching my sister-in-law, and it just so happened that her friend went to the restroom when you arrived, making you misunderstand that my sister-in-law was looking for someone else?" Jean-Ichen wasn't stupid either, and quickly figured it out. He chuckled and said, "Brother, since you and my sister-in-law have gotten your marriage license and are husband and wife, it's normal for Grandma to be anxious. Grandma just wants to provoke you, make you jealous. Brother, are you jealous? I never knew what jealousy tasted like." Jean-Ichen laughed heartily. "Then have my sister-in-law make you jealous someday so you can taste it. Grandma likes my sister-in-law so much, brother. I think you'll fall for her sooner or later. Besides her background, my sister-in-law is excellent in every other aspect. The crafts she makes with copper wire are truly exceptional. So beautiful." He had also received a money tree from his sister-in-law. It wasn't valuable, but the more he looked at it, the more he loved it. He decided to take it to his office tomorrow and put it on his desk to attract wealth. Jean-Ian recalled the video Grandma had sent him. Hai Tong was concentrating on her handiwork. Utterly captivating. He wouldn't admit it, but he'd replayed the video countless times, inwardly acknowledging that a woman engrossed in a task, brimming with confidence, radiated a magnetic charm, drawing others in like a powerful magnet. They say a confident woman is the most beautiful. Hai Tong certainly embodied that confidence. She was a strong and independent woman. I've never tasted vinegar in my life, and I never will. Aren't you asleep? Jeanine was startled to see Hai Tong walk in from the balcony. He stammered to Johnny Chin on the phone. I was just about to sleep. Thought I'd give you a call before I did. Going to sleep now. He hung up abruptly. Johnny Chin. I was sitting on the balcony and fell asleep without realizing it. Your conversation woke me up. Jeanine frowned. The night air is cold. Be careful not to catch a chill. Thanks for your concern. Hai Tong yawned. Mr. Jean, I'm going to bed now. She didn't mention anything about the evening's events. Jeanine watched her return to her room, silent. He wasn't sure if she had heard his conversation with Johnny Chin, or how much she had heard. Having a wife in his own home made Jean-Yves feel like his privacy had vanished. The next morning at breakfast, Jean-Yves discovered exactly how much Hai Tong had heard. Next to his breakfast sat a nearly full bottle of vinegar. Hai Tong had made noodles. Each of their bowls held a fried egg, along with spring onions, coriander, and shredded meat. Hai Tong brought a bottle of Lao Gan Ma chili sauce from the kitchen, opened it, added a dab to her noodles, and then pushed it toward Jeanine. Want some? It makes the noodles taste better. No, thank you. Jeanine declined. Hai Tong closed the lid and set the chili sauce aside. She then picked up the vinegar, opened it, and poured some in her noodles. I like to add vinegar to my noodles, she said. The sourness is quite tasty. Jean-Yves remained silent. Mr. Jean, last night you told someone you'd never tasted vinegar. Try it now. I'll add some for you. Without waiting for a reply, Hai Tong poured vinegar into his bowl, closed the lid, placed the bottle next to the chili sauce, picked up her chopsticks, and said, Eat. Jeanine watched her for a moment before picking up his chopsticks. The noodles with vinegar were a bit sour, but as she'd said, the sourness was quite pleasant. How does it taste? Sour. Jeanine replied instinctively. That's the taste of vinegar, sour. Now that you've tried it, mister. Jean, don't tell people you've never tasted it. They'll think your intelligence is inferior to a 3-year-old's. Jeanine. Hai Tong finished her noodles, tidied the kitchen as usual, and then came out to tell Jeanine, I'm leaving first. Remember to lock the door when you go out. Jeanine glanced at her twice, and then lowered his head to continue eating his noodles. By the way, can I take some of the fruit to my sister? She had bought a lot of fruit that day, and after her in-laws left, there was a lot left in the refrigerator. The two of them couldn't eat it all, and it would go bad if left for too long. This time Jeanine spoke. Your sister is not an outsider. You can take it if you want. You don't need to ask me specifically. In this house, unless it's a big matter, you can make your own decisions. We're not very familiar with each other, and I'm living in your room. Asking you is a sign of respect for you as my husband. I'm not someone who takes everything good back to my parents' house. It's just that I bought a little too much fruit that day, and we've already eaten a lot. It would be a waste if it goes bad. I'll give some to my sister, so it doesn't go to waste. Jean-Yves hummed in agreement. Seeing he had no objections, Hai Tong packed 2 bags of fruit and took them to her sister. Hai Ling said to her sister, Don't bring everything to me. If I want to eat something, I'll buy it myself. It's just me and Jeanine at home. I occasionally eat some, but Jeanine doesn't like fruit. It's a waste if it goes bad. He told me to bring some to you and said you're not an outsider. She had never seen Jean-Yves eat fruit. He went out early and came back late every day. As soon as he returned, he would go into his room and wouldn't come out until the next day. He wouldn't eat anything at home. Hai Tong suspected that if she didn't make him breakfast, he would eat out like he used to, and there might not even be a glass of boiled water at home. Hearing her sister say this, Hai Ling accepted the 2 bags of fruit. Hai Tong played with her nephew for a while, and then went back to the shop to work. As soon as Hai Tong left, Jeanine quickly dumped the unfinished bowl of noodles into the trash can. At first, it tasted sour and quite good, but the more he ate, the sourer it became. He simply couldn't eat it anymore. He had already said he didn't get jealous. Worried that Hai Tong would see the noodles he had thrown away when she came back in the evening, he diligently took the garbage bag out. His bodyguards were waiting for him downstairs. Since the young madam had left first, They didn't have to worry about her finding out. Seeing the young master coming downstairs with a garbage bag, the bodyguards were momentarily stunned. Having been with the young master for many years, they saw him as a god, aloof and remote. After throwing away the garbage, Jeanine walked towards his car. After a few steps, he noticed that the bodyguards hadn't followed him. He turned around and called out, "Have you been frozen by Sun Wukong?" Standing there like a bunch of dummies. The bodyguards snapped back to their senses and hurried to catch up. The commercial vehicle that Jean-In used to pretend to be poor was driven to Jean Group by a bodyguard every day, and when Jean-In was ready to go home, he would drive the commercial vehicle back. Half an hour later, as soon as Jean-Yin's car arrived at the company entrance, it was blocked by a red Ferrari sports car parked horizontally in an arrogant and domineering manner. The girl in red in the sports car had wavy hair, delicate features, a diamond necklace around her neck, diamond bracelets on her fair wrists, and diamond earrings. In short, she was covered in jewels. After blocking Jean Yin's car, she got out and walked to the Rolls-Royce, knocking on Jean Yin's window. Jean Yin lowered the window. "Shang Xiaofei, you have 2 minutes to move your car." Jean Yin spoke coldly. Shang Xiaofei was the cherished daughter of the Shang Group's chairman and the younger sister of CEO Shang Wuing. Deeply loved and pampered by her family, she was the most eligible bachelorette in Guangqing. Jeanine wait. As if remembering something, Shang Xiaofei turned and ran back to her sports car, returning with a large bouquet of bright red roses. She ran back holding the enormous bouquet and tried to shove it into the car. "Jeanine," she said, "these are for you. I know you and my brother don't get along, but I love you. I feel I should confess my feelings and let you know my love for you is true." The Shang Group and the Jean Group weren't exactly mortal enemies, but their businesses overlapped in some areas, and as the saying goes, fellow tradesmen are often rivals. The two families competed in the marketplace, and their relationship was not harmonious. However, at a banquet years ago, Shang Wuheng's younger sister, Shang Xiaofei, had fallen in love with Jeanine at first sight. Due to the business rivalry between their families, not only her brother, but even her doting parents disapproved of her pursuing Jeanine. Although Shang Xiaofei was raised in a pampered environment, she wasn't foolish. She had considered giving up on Jeanine, but unfortunately, after several years, she couldn't forget him. Instead, her feelings only deepened. She particularly liked Jean Yin's icy demeanor, finding him cool. And because Jean Yin disliked young women approaching him, it ignited a desire in Shang Xiaofei to conquer him. She decided, regardless of her family's opinion, since she couldn't forget him, she would boldly confess her feelings. Starting today, she, Shang Xiaofei, would publicly pursue Jeanine. Jean Yin's face darkened. He snatched the bouquet from her and threw it far away. Then he rolled up the car window and coldly instructed his driver, "Drive. Jeanine, Jeanine, I love you. I'm going to pursue you." Shang Xiaofei slapped the car window, shouting loudly. As the driver started the car, he asked, "Young master, what about Miss Shang's car?" "Hit it." The driver didn't accelerate and ram her car directly. Instead, a car from their security detail sped forward and slammed into Shang Xiaofei's multi-million-dollar Ferrari. A loud crash echoed. The security guards on duty stared, dumbfounded. After knocking Shang Xiaofei's car out of the way, Jean Yin's Rolls-Royce quickly drove into the company. Shang Xiaofei was stunned, watching her recently purchased sports car battered and damaged by Jean Yin's security detail. She stared blankly, and by the time she reacted and tried to chase after him, the security guards had already closed the company gates. "Jeanine," Shang Xiaofei yelled, "you damaged my car. You have to buy me a new one. You owe me. I'll come every day to demand a new car." Although distressed about her damaged car, she realized this gave her an excuse to pester Jeanine. Shang Xiaofei felt that the collision had actually created more opportunities for her. In any case, she had confessed her feelings and clearly told Jeanine that she would pursue him. Regardless of the outcome, she had taken action and wouldn't regret it in the future. Actually, the way Jeanine just rammed her sports car was incredibly cool. Of course, it would have been better if it wasn't her car. The security guard on duty thought to himself. Asterisk, did Miss Zhang borrow some courage from the heavens today? She actually dared to come to Jean group and cause a scene, even claiming she'll pursue Mr. Jean. Asterisk, truly audacious.